to your point about events, I did kind of jiggle what was the initial one because I did figure events was going to be an interesting topic. Again, your comments about Summit, I'd be honest, none of your comments have surprised me. There's not anything that you've said that I found surprising. So this was kind of what the events committee is supposed to do. But I guess I kind of wanted to show what we're looking at for next year. And then we could probably talk a little more about Summit if you wanted. So here we are at our Summit North America. I don't really know that we've made any sort of decision as to what we're doing with DAC or whether it makes sense to do something with DAC. I think that was one point of discussion. Oops, don't know why there's 2 commas. Embedded World, we are doing kind of a large community booth, and thank you for some of you who are sponsoring. But it's back to, how holistically are we telling the story, and there are opportunities to still sponsor. The RISC-V Summit in Europe, there are ongoing discussions. The intent would be to have that in Barcelona the first week of June. And I have some slides on that because that's the case where I really do want your input back to, the community in Europe that's been driving it has been very focused on the technical content. But as I said when I started, we need to find a way to balance technical and industry, and where are those ways to bridge it so it makes sense for you, our members and sponsors. The hope is to have a RISC-V event in China, but again, given the situation there right now, that hasn't been nailed down. So I think we're again trying to balance what are the places that we also go and show up to support our members. We are looking at what makes sense potentially with supercomputing in the fall. But it's trying to see, are there other places where, in that case, I'll be honest, I think that was more holdover. So as far as that, as I was looking at the calendar, good question. I did not ask that question myself. That's just something that's been on there as far as, why are we participating in that? So I will be honest, I don't have a good answer for that one that I was copying over what was on last year's calendar. So we're not planning to exhibit right now, so I should be clear. So that's not from a standpoint of we're looking at exhibiting or anything. Where we have committed right now, we're here at Summit. We are working actively towards some sort of event in Europe. What does that look like yet? I want your input. Embedded World, we are committed to. And obviously RISC-V days and other things, so this is kind of a holdover in what's being done. But how do we go back and define it? So Open Source Summit is more of a shame on me as far as that was on last year's calendar. So like what we're doing, but it's not that we are taking a sponsorship or having a booth or expecting you to do that. So maybe that's just more that we're speaking or things. So I need to do a better job, but that we don't have a booth presence there. We can look at September. I think that's good. That's kind of the case too, where we have to look at what else is happening in the ecosystem. Like, is the TSMC event going to be there? When's ARM's Dev Summit or other things? So from a situation of, I agree. I think it would be nice to find another date on the calendar. But how I like to approach events is making sure holistically we look at things so we're not necessarily competing. Fair enough. That's actually a question that I was kind of curious about. I don't think we are. So I think there's an opportunity to involve with GSA. So I think that's a good one as we look to grow. So that's an excellent point. I think that's something we should explore. I don't think formally we are engaging with them in any way, at least not that I've heard. Those are both excellent ideas. So both Hot Chips and the GSA events, I think those are great events. I do want to add, so Callista is going to be speaking at a GSA event in Europe. So Callista is going to be doing a talk at a GSA event in Europe. Event tiers. Okay. I did want, as we kind of move into events, just to get some thoughts. So as I mentioned, there were plans to do an event, more of a summit in Europe. Some of you might have gone to the RISC-V Paris days, which I think people felt were good from kind of a technical perspective, but again, how are we bridging industry and technical? So we're working with the organizers from the RISC-V Paris days on what can we do to kind of bridge it and have a more formal RISC-V European Summit. And here's where we kind of were looking for your input. So right now, what the organizers have proposed is Europe, again, that first week in Barcelona, the first week of June. But this is the kind of thing where I need your input. Like, what makes sense to you? You know, does it make sense, like right now, you know, there's plans to make it like a 3-day event, like 3 days of an expo. Does that make sense? My personal sense is it doesn't make sense for you to just go stand there. Robert. One of the things I will say that I do really like, and again, as I'm learning, but I do appreciate, the organizers, the European organizers are very passionate, and they're really trying to do a lot of work. And back to your point, we're trying to find that balance between Linux Foundation and really working with the organizers of the RISC-V Days Paris as to what does that look like. So we're actively working on that. Yes. Correct. Yeah, sure. Might change, that's why I put tentative. I didn't even spell it right, sorry. I was scrambling. Dates were there, and I tried to add tentative, but I misspelled it. So yeah, again, back to we need to define how many days, what that looks like. And again, the initial organizers had initially proposed like 2 days of industry and then 2 days of technical content. We don't want that separate. We're trying to find, again, that bridge. And that's why we were throwing out ideas like careers. No, I agree. Thank you, Robert. That's good feedback. Got to work with the European team because they are hoping to have that. And one of the things they're really hoping as well to do is because of different programs in Europe where there's things where it's more like having people get together that are working on kind of governmental and industry programs too. So how do the days look out? So to your points, everything that we're kind of talked about, we're looking at as far as organization. How does that structure make sense? That's why I'm asking. In fact, we put off committing to anything because I wanted to come here and get feedback as far as like the number of days. What makes sense and what does, you know, participation in an expo hall look like? That's why, you know, for me, the last thing I want is everybody just sitting at a booth and twiddling your thumbs. That's no good. So, you know, how do we make it such that it's useful? Like, is it useful to sit here and talk careers? Is it useful to look at training, certification? You know, one of the things when somebody was talking today with like the smaller organizations in Europe, is it almost like it makes sense to have like a Shark Tank type of thing, where smaller companies are kind of coming in and really pitching what they're doing, companies that you might not have visibility into. You know, these are the kinds of things where it'd be really helpful to get thoughts. Like, you know, if our goal is to make RISC-V be wildly successful and if we're having these events, what does success look like? And success, we have to go back to, it has to be that balance. It has to be win-win. So I welcome your thoughts. If you know, have thoughts, chase me down over the next 2 days. But let me know, because again, I want to put together something that you feel you will be successful at. It's going to help, as well as we're going to make RISC-V be successful. So the specific industries in this case they're looking at focus on other recommendations are auto, industrial, and maritime, among others. But these are some of the things like focused areas they're talking about. Okay. I can't commit to that. I think it makes a lot of sense. Huh? I will say very much, at least as far as the organizers, to your point, as far as the outreach at Brussels has come up, it's very much how are we pulling in government. So that's not the very much of the talk with the organizers is ensuring that it's how are we pulling in government, and so that's part of it. I can't speak to EPI specifically, but as far as how we're pulling in government, they are talking about that. That's an intent. I know BSC is involved, or they have representatives that are kind of working on the academic side to be part of that. So API is good. I haven't drilled down on that. I can't speak to that. But as far as government holistically, that's the intent, to be a key stakeholder in the audience. Well, anyhow, I think what I'll probably do offline is just talk to some of you as far as the, like, what would exhibition space look like. I think it'll be a more holistic conversation, but I just, from a standpoint of today, I just want you to start thinking about it. Again, your input's really good and valuable, but we want to understand, what does it look like to you? What's going to make sense, rather than we just recreate this. This isn't going to work. I know that. But what does it look like? And I need your input as far as what should it look like, what you think makes sense. Comments? Okay. This was just a plug. If you haven't sponsored Embedded World or interested, we are still doing that.